Go ahead and get started. So I'm starting with the same script that we left off with in our last video with these two routes for our home page and our about page. So we can see in our two route functions that we're returning these two HTML headings, but most HTML files have a lot more HTML code than this. It contains an entire structure with a head tag, a body tag, and all of that. Now there's nothing stopping us from returning all of that HTML here. We could, for example, instead of just returning this one heading tag, I could put in 3 quotes for a multi-line string, and I could just return all of this here and say, doc type HTML, then open up the HTML tag and just kind of keep going there. But you can imagine that with a lot of pages and routes that this would get really ugly really fast, and that we'd create a ton of repeated HTML like this for every single route. So the best way to do this would be to instead use templates. So to use templates, we first need to create a templates directory within our folder, within our project, And I'll do that here within Sublime Text. So I'm just going to right click on my project and say new folder. And I'm going to call this templates, and that's all lowercase. And now within our templates directory, I'm going to create templates for both of our routes that we currently have. So I'm going to create one for our home route and one for our about route. So I'm going to right click on our templates page here and say new file. And I will call one of these home.html. And I will create another new file and call this one about.html. And let's do our home route first. So I'll put all of the HTML that we'd like to have within our home page within this template here. So in Sublime Text, if I just type HTML and then press tab, then we can see that it fills out, a minimal HTML page structure for us. Now, if your editor doesn't create a structure like this, then you can find these pages in my GitHub code, and I'll leave a link to that in the description section below if you'd like to copy and paste it from there. So now that we have a basic HTML structure, let's add the heading tag that we had in our Python script into this home template. So I'm going to go back to our application and just grab one of these heading tags. So this is our about page tag here. And I'm going to paste this into our home template, and so I'll go to the body here and paste that in and change about to home so that we have home page. And now that we have this home template ready, let's actually use this template when we navigate to our home page. So if we go back to our application, then instead of returning just plain HTML here, instead we can render the template. So first we're going to have to import the render template function from Flask. So up here in our import statement, I'm just going to put a comma and add in the render template function that we want to import. And now for our return statement here, we can say return render template. And now the template that we want to render, and that template for our home route is home.html. So now let's save this and run it from our command line to make sure that it works. So I will pull back up my terminal here. Now, if you don't have your terminal open, then you have to have it open and navigate to your project directory like we did in the last video. And if you remember in that video, we can run our application just by saying python flaskblog.py. We can see that it's running on our local host in debug mode. So I'll pull up our web browser here and reload that page. And we can see that this looks about the same as it did before. But if I right click and go to view page source, then we can see that instead of just that H1 tag, that now we have an entire HTML structure here. So it is pulling that structure from that template. Okay, so now let's do the same thing for our about page. So I'm going to pull back up our application here, and I'm going to go to our home template first and copy this structure and paste it into our about.html. And I'll change this to be the about page instead of home page. And then within our application, we can't forget that we have to actually render that template now. So I will copy this from our home route and replace that heading tag, and the template that we want to render there is about.html. So I'll save that, pull back up our site, and go to the /about page. We can see that it looks similar to what it did in the first video, but if we view our page source, then now we have that entire HTML structure that it's pulling from that template. So that worked. So I'll pull back up my application here. So if you were just using Flask to basically serve up static HTML pages, then that's basically what we've created here. All you'd have to do is add in more detailed HTML and CSS, and you'd be good to go. But pretty much every web application these days doesn't just contain static information. You usually have, posts and updates and all kinds of different information that is being added to the site on a regular basis. So for example, if you remember the application that I showed in the first video that I said would be our final application at the end of this series, it had a lot of different posts by different authors, and those could have been blog posts or pictures or whatever it is that you're making with your application. So let's say that we had some posts like this that we wanted to display in our template. So how would we do that? So let's add some dummy data so that we can see how this is actually passed into our template. So I'm just going to add some dummy data to the top of the file here, and I'm just going to call this post, and I'm going to set this equal to a list, and this is going to be a list of dictionaries. And each dictionary is going to represent a single blog post. So for example, I will have an author here, and I'll just fill out some sample information. So I'll have an author of Corey Schaefer, a title, and I'll just set this to blog post 1. And then I will also have some content, and the content we will say is first content, or how about first post content? Okay. And then lastly, let's also do a date posted. So for a date posted, I'll just pass in a string here. So we'll say April 20th, 2018. So now let's add in another dictionary here with some different data to represent another dummy blog post. So we'll change some of this information up. So we'll say that this author is Jane Doe. For the title, we'll say blog post 2, second post content, and we'll say that this is April 21st, 2018. Okay, so for now, let's pretend that we made a database call and got back this list of posts, and that's what this post variable is. Now we can pass these posts into our template just by passing an argument with our data. So if I came down here to our home template, then within our render template function, I could simply say post is equal to post. So now, whatever variable name we use as the argument name here that we pass in, we will have access to that variable in our template, and it will be equal to this post data. So now let's switch over to our home template and see how we would loop through this post data. So the templating engine that Flask uses is called Jinja 2, and it allows us to write code here within our templates. So to write a for loop, we can open up a code block, and a code block is represented by these curly braces and then 2 parentheses here. And within these, we can say for post in post. And we also have to tell the templating engine when the for loop ends. And we just do that with another code block. So that's curly braces and parentheses. And we can just say end for. So now within this for loop, we can print out our post information one post at a time. So if we come in here, let's say that we wanted to print out the post title in an H1 tag. So we can just say H1. And now that we want to print out an actual variable, this isn't going to be the same as the code block with the curly braces and parentheses. This is just going to be 2 curly braces because now this is just going to be a variable that we're printing out. So we'll say that we want to print out the post.title, and we can use this dot access here within the template. So that dot access does work. So now let's print out a paragraph tag, and let's print out the author and the date that it was posted as well. So I'll say by, and then we want to put the post author here. So we'll put in our double curly braces, post.author. And within the same paragraph tag, I'll print out the date that it was posted on. So I'll say on, and then we want to say post dot, and I believe I called this, okay, this was date posted. So we want to use this date posted attribute there. And lastly, let's print out the actual content of the post. So just like we were doing before, the 2 curly braces and post.content. So real quick, let's just look over this again. So we're opening up a code block here, and that code block says for post in post. And we got this post value here, this variable, we got that by passing in this argument into our template. And this argument is equal to this post dummy data here at the top. So this post variable within our template is going to be equal to this data. So that is where this comes from here. So we're looping over those posts, and for each one, we're going to print out this information of the post. So if we save that, now let's see if this worked. So our web server is still running. So I'm going to go back to our home page and see if we get that data. So we can see that it looped over our dummy data and displayed the information that we specified within the HTML. And if I view the page source to actually view the HTML that it gave to us, now this is a little small here, but we can see that it has both of these sections that were created here within the for loop. Okay, so now let me open up our home template again here. So I'll pull up Sublime Text. So we saw how to do a for loop, but we can also do if-else conditionals as well. So let's say that we wanted to be able to pass a title to our web pages. But if we didn't pass a title, then we would just want to use a default of Flask blog or something like that. So we could come up here to our title, and I will just type in the default title that we would want for our page here, and we'll call that Flask blog. But now let's add in an if-else conditional here to where if we actually passed in a title into this template, then it would print out Flask blog -title or something like that. So to do an if statement, we can do our code block here with the curly braces and parentheses. And instead of a for loop, we'll say if title, and then I will copy this here and paste that here. And now we can do an else. And now we can end this. I'll paste that in again. We can end this just like we ended the for loop by saying end if. So this title that we currently have is what we want as our default title. So I'm going to put that in our else block because we want that to be the default if no title is provided. And if there is a title provided, then we want it to be flask.blog dash, and then print out that title that we passed in. And we'll see what this looks like in just a second. And let's also add this title section to our about template as well. So I'm going to copy this entire if-else conditional and paste that in here to the head section. So now if we go back to our application code, let's not pass in a title for our home template because we just want that to be the default for our application. But for our about page, let's pass in a title of about. So I will put in a comma there and just say title is equal to about. So for our homepage template where we didn't pass in a title, then it should come in here and say if title and see that it doesn't have one. So it'll come down and just use this Flask blog as the title. In our about template, it'll see that we do have a title that we passed in, and it will use this title here instead. So now I'm going to pull this back up in our browser and reload these pages. So I'll reload this, and we can see here in our tab that the title of this page is now called Flask blog. And if we view the page source, we can see that we can see that too. And I know that this text is a little small here. But if we go to our about page, so /about, now we can see that the title of this page in our tab is Flask blog -about. So it is setting those values correctly using our conditional. Okay, so we're almost finished up with this tutorial, but there is one thing about our templates that isn't a very good design. So if you notice, our homepage template and our about template have a lot of similar repeated code. So if I pull those up and compare those, we can see that a lot of this is similar, and there's just this one section here down in the body that is different. And that's never a good thing in programming because it means that if we want to update one of those sections, then we need to update it in every single location. So for example, if we wanted to change our default title for our website, then we would have to make that change in both the home and the about template. So it's almost always better to have everything that is repeated in a single place so that there is only one place to make changes, and our home template and about template only contain the information that is unique to those pages. So to accomplish this, we can use something called template inheritance. So let's see what this looks like. So I'm going to create a new template in our templates directory, and I'm going to call this layout.html. So within our templates, I'm going to create a new file here, and I'm going to call this layout.html and hit enter there to create that file. And within layout.html, we want to pick out all of the repeated sections between our home and our about templates. So if we compare these back and forth, like we said before, the only thing that is different is this body section. So I'm going to copy the code from one of our templates here. I'll use the about template and paste this into our layout.html template. And then I'll just delete the part that is unique here to the about page. So I'll just delete everything within the body tag there. So now we only have the HTML that is shared between both of our routes. So now I'm going to create a block, and a block is a section that the child templates can override. So we'll see this in action in just a second. So I'll create a block within our body tag, and I'll just call this block content. So to do this, we can use the code blocks that we've seen before, and instead we're going to use this block keyword. So I'll say block content, and that's what we're calling this block, and then do another code block right after this, and then we want to end that block. So I'll say end block. So now within our home and about templates, we'll inherit this layout template and get all of this information, but then we'll just override the content section with the stuff that is unique to each page. So I'll switch over here to the home template. And in this template, we want to use that layout template as the parent so we can get rid of all the information that is in that layout template. So that is everything that is outside of the body. So I will remove all of this here. And basically, we're just keeping the for loop that is unique to this homepage. So now at the top of this template, we can use that layout template by opening up a code block here and using the extends keyword, and we want to extend that layout.html template. And now we want this for loop content here to override the content block of that layout template. So to do that, we can wrap it in a content block by saying, and I'm going to indent this here. So we can just open up a content block here by saying block content, and then down here at the bottom we will end that. So I will do another content block and say end block. Now the way that we have it here would work, and this is how I see most people doing it, but Jinja 2, the templating engine that we're using, actually allows you to put the name of the block after the end block as well. And I like doing that because if you have multiple blocks, then it can be easy to lose track of what blocks you're closing. So I like to be explicit. So after end block here, I'm going to say end block content. So content there isn't needed, but like I said, I like to put it just to be explicit that it's actually closing off this block here. Okay, so now let's do the same thing with our about template. And I'll just copy everything that we have here and paste it into our about template here at the top. But instead of our content being just this for loop here, it's just going to be this H1 heading. So I'll grab this H1 heading and paste that into our content block. And now we can get rid of everything that was here before. Okay, so I know that may have been a lot to take in, so we'll go back over that again once we make sure that this is all still working. So after we save this, then we should be able to reload it in our browser and still have the same pages that we had before. So let's check this out really fast. So let's make sure that our web server is still running. Now we'll pull back up Chrome here, and if we go to our about page, we can see that that works. And if we go to our home page, we can see that that still works as well. And if we actually check the source code of these pages, then we can see that it still has the entire HTML structure there as well. So all of that is still working. So these pages look the same as they did before, but now we're using that template inheritance so that we're not repeating code. So let me show you why this is so powerful. So let's say that we wanted to now update our entire website to use Bootstrap. Now, if you don't know what Bootstrap is, basically it's an extremely popular library that makes it easy to add some nice styles to your website. And I'll be using Bootstrap in this series since it will allow us to add nice styles easily without taking away any of the focus from Flask. So to add Bootstrap to our website, I'm going to open up the starter template from the Bootstrap documentation to see how they say to do this. And I already have this open up here. So this is a basic starter template that they give here, and we can see that we need to add some tags and a link to some CSS here in the head of the website, and also down here at the bottom, right before the closing body tag, we need to add some JavaScript files as well. Now the CSS and JavaScript it's using are all served from a CDN, which is a content delivery network, so there's nothing we actually need to download. So we should just be able to drop this into our site and we'll be good to go. Now there is actually a Flask extension for Bootstrap called Flask Bootstrap, and I won't be using that in this video because I feel like it's something additional to learn, and if you're already familiar with Bootstrap classes, then there's really no reason that you can't just use it directly. And also, I feel like it just gives you a bit more control with the design just to do it manually. But if anyone is interested, then I could show how to use the Flask Bootstrap extension in a later video. Now, if we weren't using template inheritance, then we'd have to make these changes to every template in our application. And not only would that be easy to screw up, but it would be almost impossible to maintain once the number of pages on our website, grew to a certain level. But now we just need to make these changes to that single layout template that our other templates inherit from. So to do this, I'll first copy these meta tags and the CSS that needs to be added to the head of our page. So I will grab these meta tags here and the Bootstrap CSS and copy that. And that needs to be added to the head of our page. So I'll open back up our layout template, which will affect our other templates since they inherit from them. And within the head, I'll actually put these above the title here. So I will just paste those in and save that. And now let's also copy the JavaScript that we need as well. So I'm going to go back here and grab all of this JavaScript and copy that. And we will paste that above the closing body tag of our layout. So down here in our body, I will paste in that JavaScript and save that. And now let's use a Bootstrap specific class to see if this works. So I'm going to wrap our content in a div with the class of container, which will give the content some good padding and spacing. So I will do a div here, and this div, I will give a class equal to container, which is a Bootstrap class. And now I will move our content inside of that container div. And then I will clear up these here. And simply adding in that CSS and JavaScript should be enough for our application to now be using Bootstrap. So if I go and reload our page in the browser now, so I'm going to refresh this, and I'm going to do a hard refresh with Command-Shift-R, which will also clear the cache. So we can see that when I reloaded that the text changed, and also the margins are also different. And if I go to the About page, so I'll do /about, then we can see that text and margins are different on that page as well. And it works on both of those pages because both templates are inheriting that single layout template. Okay, so I know that's a lot to take in, so let's do a quick recap before moving on to the next topic. So we created a new template called layout.html, which we are seeing here. And this is our parent template that the others will inherit from. So this has the main structure of our HTML that is going to be included on every page. Now you can have multiple blocks, but right now we only have this single block down here called block content. And we didn't have to call that block content. We could have called it pretty much anything that we wanted. But this content block is what the other templates are going to override. And when they override the content block with data, it will place that data at this location in the HTML. So if we go to our home template, then we can see we are extending the layout template, and we are specifying that we want to put some information into our content block. And that information is the dummy post data that we've seen before. So when it's all said and done, if I go to the home page in the browser and look at the page source here, then we can see that we have all of this information from the layout template, and then our two dummy blog posts are here in the container div, which is where our content block was located. Okay, so now that we have a base layout template in place, let's add a navigation bar and some global styles to our website so that it looks a little nicer and similar to our final product that we saw before. Now, this is a good bit of HTML, so I'm going to grab this from some code snippets so you don't have to watch me type all of this out. And the link to these code snippets will be in the description section below so that you can grab these snippets as well. Now, really, you could follow along with these videos just fine without styling your application, but having these in place will just give you a better idea for how this might look in a real finished application. So let me open up my snippets folder here, and I have this on my desktop. So I'm going to say from within Sublime, I'm going to open this and open this snippets folder on my desktop. Now, the first snippet that I'm going to grab is in this file called navigation.html. So you can see I have a lot of HTML here with a lot of different bootstrap styles. So I'm going to copy that and go back to our layout.html file, and I'm going to paste all of that information right below the opening body tag. So I'll paste that in and get these indentions correct there. So what we added here is a navigation bar with some bootstrap classes that will make this look nice and also is responsive. So for example, if you're on a smaller screen, then it will resize everything appropriately. Okay, and I'm also going to put in a new main section here that contains our content block, and this snippet is in my main.html folder. So I'm going to bring this up, close down that snippet, and open up this main.html snippet here. And like I said, I'll have links to these in the description sections below if you want to grab those as well. So I'm going to copy this, and we can see that we have our content block in here. So I've got all of that copied. I'm going to minimize this. And in our layouts, I'm going to replace our current container div and our current block content there. And I'm going to replace that with what I just copied. So we have this new container, and I will indent those correctly. And also I will remove the space here. Okay, and I also have a few custom styles that aren't Bootstrap specific, and those are going to be in a file called main.css. Now, since this will be a CSS file in our actual project, we'll need to put it somewhere. And in Flask, static files like CSS and JavaScript need to be located in a static directory. So let's create a directory in our project and call this static. So I'll right click on my project here and do new folder, and I will create this static folder, which is all lowercase. And then within our static folder, I'm going to create our main.css file. So I'm going to say new file, and this is going to be main.css. So I'll create that. And within this main.css, I'm going to grab another snippet of code. And in my snippets folder, I called this main.css. So I will pull this up and do a Control A to grab all of this. It's not very long. It's only 80 lines of custom styles. So I will copy that and put that into our main.css within our actual project. Okay, and now that we have this main.css file that we want to use, now we have to include this in our layout template. And we're going to need to use a new Flask function here called URL_for. And URL_for is a function that will find the exact location of routes for us so that we don't need to worry about it in the background. So let's go back to our main application, our flaskblog.py, and let's import that URL_for function. So up here in the imports from Flask, I will also import URL_for. And now back in our layout, we can use this by coming up here to the head section of our website. And we're going to want to add this style below the Bootstrap styles. So I'm going to grab the opening part of the Bootstrap style there. And I will now say that I want a new style sheet. And this is going to be a type equal to text/CSS. And we can use the href to say where this CSS file is located. Now this is where we use that URL_for function. So I'm going to open up some double curly braces here so that we can write some code. And I will say URL_for, and we want this to be a URL for our static directory. And within our static directory, we can pass in another argument here of file name. And we will set this file name equal to, and I'll actually use single quotes here since we have double quotes on the outside. And I'll just say equal to main.css. So now this style sheet at the top of our layout here is linking to this main.css file within our static folder. And our URL_for function will take care of finding that exact location for us. Now, it's a good idea to use URL_for for just about as many links as you can in your site. So it would also be good for us to use this in our navigation as well. But our navigation bar currently has two routes that we haven't created yet, and we'll be creating those in the next video. So we'll actually change those navigation links once those routes exist. And at this point, we should be pretty close to being done. So if we reload our page in the browser, let's see if all of these changes have taken effect. And I might need to check and see if our web server is still running, and it is. So I can close this down and now reload our page. Then we can see that with those added snippets that this looks a lot nicer. Now there are only a few more touches that I'd like to add. So it would be nice to visually split up these blog posts a bit And the main.css file that we already added has some styles for that. We just need to put in the correct HTML. So within my snippets folder, I have a file called article.html. So let me grab that snippet as well. So I'm going to come over here and open up article.html, and I'm going to copy this. And we can see here that this is just some updated code for how our post is displayed. This is all of our post information that we had before with some additional HTML and styles. So I'm going to put this within our loop for our blog post, which is currently on our home page. So if I go back and open up our home template, then this is the loop for our blog post here. And instead of these H1 and paragraphs that we had before, I'm just going to get rid of those and paste in our new code. And I'll get this indentation correct here and save that. Okay, so now if we save that and reload it in our browser, then let's see what that looks like. Okay, so now we can see that those blog posts are nice and split up a little bit better than they were before. Okay, so this is all starting to come together and look a lot nicer. So I think that is going to do it for this video. I hope that now you have a good understanding of templates and how we can pass data into them, and also the benefits of creating parent templates so that we can update every page on our site in a single location. In the next video, we'll be learning how to create and validate forms so that we can get started with creating some accounts and posting some real data to our website instead of just using this dummy data. So if anyone has any questions about what we covered in this video, then feel free to ask in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer those. And if you enjoy these tutorials and would like to support them, then there are several ways you can do that. The easiest way is to simply like the video and give it a thumbs up. And also, it's a huge help to share these videos with anyone who you think would find them useful. And if you have the means, you can contribute through Patreon, and there's a link to that page in the description section below. Be sure to subscribe for future videos, and thank you all for watching.